every beat of my heart. We got something going on.
Well, it's been 30 years since Islands in the Stream was a hit.
And he said, you know what we need? We need Dolly Parton. And she walked into the studio. That song took on a life of its own.
Well, I couldn't believe it. And they told me that my friend and singing partner, Kenny Rogers, had passed away.
For 40 years, fans whispered the same question. Were Dolly Parton and Kenny Rogers just friends or something much more? On stage, their chemistry was undeniable. Off stage, their laughter and lingering touches only fueled rumors. For decades, both stars dodged the question with jokes, half-answers, and mystery. But now, Dolly has finally spoken. What she revealed about their relationship shocked everyone. This isn't just the story of two country legends. It's the story of temptation, loyalty, and a bond so powerful it defied the rules of fame, love, and even time itself. Dolly Parton and Kenny Rogers may have seemed destined to share the spotlight, but their first encounters were anything but magical. They crossed paths in Nashville in the early 1970s, when Kenny appeared on Dolly's short-lived variety show. At the time, they were both solo acts carving their own paths in country music, focused more on their careers than on each other. That first meeting was brief, almost forgettable. Neither of them could have guessed that their lives would become so intertwined. For years afterward, they moved in the same circles without forming any real bond. Each was building a career that would soon take them to the very top of the industry. Kenny was transitioning from rock and pop into country, while Dolly was already breaking barriers with her songwriting and growing stardom. By 1983, Kenny was struggling in the studio with a song called Islands in the Stream, written by Barry Gibb of the Bee Gees. The track was meant to be Kenny's big crossover hit, but he hated how it sounded. He later admitted he was ready to walk away from it entirely. That's when fate stepped in. Barry suggested turning it into a duet. And by sheer coincidence, Dolly was in the same studio building that day. Kenny recalled being nervous about asking her to join, since she was already a superstar. But when Dolly walked in and heard the track, everything changed. She agreed instantly, stepped up to the microphone, and within minutes the chemistry was undeniable. Their voices blended effortlessly, creating a sound that felt both natural and electrifying. The tension Kenny had felt about the song disappeared, replaced by excitement. What had started as a failing solo project suddenly transformed into something timeless. When Islands in the Stream was released later that year, it exploded. The song shot to #1 on the pop, country, and adult contemporary charts, becoming one of the best-selling duets in music history. Audiences weren't just hearing a catchy tune. They were witnessing the birth of a legendary partnership. On stage, the chemistry that had appeared so quickly in the studio was even more obvious. Their laughter, playful looks, and natural ease with each other made it impossible not to wonder what was really happening behind the curtain. Some saw it as pure professionalism, while others insisted it was the start of something deeper. Once Islands in the Stream became a global sensation, Dolly Parton and Kenny Rogers were no longer just solo stars. They were a duo the world couldn't get enough of. Suddenly, fans weren't just showing up for the music, they were showing up for the chemistry. At concerts, Dolly's hand would linger on Kenny's arm just a moment too long. Kenny's eyes seemed to follow Dolly whenever she moved. The way they harmonized gave fans the impression of something more intimate than mere professional collaboration. During interviews, they leaned into the speculation with a mix of jokes and denials. In one appearance, Dolly teased that she never thought Kenny was that handsome when they first met, to which Kenny laughed and replied, "She's been trying not to fall in love with me for years, but she can't help herself." Lines like that didn't end the rumors. They only gave fans more fuel. Their chemistry was so obvious that audiences often forgot Dolly was a married woman, and Kenny had his own complicated history of marriages and divorces. To millions, they simply looked perfect together, and no amount of denial could make people believe otherwise. Behind the scenes, their friendship was becoming something rare in the entertainment business. A partnership without jealousy, ego, or competition. Kenny admired Dolly's down-to-earth personality, calling her one of the most professional artists he had ever worked with. Dolly, in turn, loved Kenny's humor and kindness, saying he made her laugh even on the hardest days. Their bond wasn't just about music. It was about trust. something that kept drawing them back to each other again and again. By the mid-1980s, Dolly Parton and Kenny Rogers were no longer just duet partners. They were being packaged as America's favorite musical couple. Nothing highlighted this more than their 1984 holiday collaboration, Once Upon a Christmas. The album was filled with cheerful duets, and to promote it, the pair filmed a CBS television special, Kenny and Dolly, A Christmas to Remember. Millions of viewers tuned in, not only for the music, but for the undeniable warmth between the two stars. On screen, Dolly and Kenny decorated trees, exchanged gifts, and sang holiday classics in a way that felt less like two colleagues working and more like two people who truly belonged in each other's lives. Families gathered around their televisions that December night, but when the credits rolled, the questions began to spread faster than the carols themselves. Were Dolly and Kenny simply putting on a show, or had fans just witnessed something real? The press didn't hesitate to make up its own answers. Tabloid headlines screamed that Dolly and Kenny were secretly in love. Magazines published grainy photographs of them whispering to each other backstage, describing them as intimate moments that surely meant more. For Dolly, the speculation wasn't new. Her real-life husband, Carl Dean, had always stayed out of the spotlight, rarely appearing at her shows or in photographs. This mystery surrounding her marriage only made it easier for the public to imagine her with Kenny. For Kenny, who had already been through multiple marriages, Dolly's steady friendship offered stability that fans mistook for romance. The Christmas project became more than a seasonal success. It became a cultural moment. Fans replayed their duets year after year, and each time the questions returned. Their chemistry was undeniable, their laughter too natural, their closeness too perfect to ignore. The more they denied it, the stronger the rumors grew. If the Christmas special had fanned the flames of speculation, the release of Real Love in 1985 threw gasoline on the fire. The single shot straight to #1 on the country charts, and soon after, Dolly and Kenny announced their Real Love tour across the United States. Night after night, arenas were packed with fans who weren't just there for the music. They wanted to see the sparks fly in person. And Dolly and Kenny gave them plenty to talk about. They laughed through songs, hugged tightly during encores, and often looked more like a couple in love than performers sharing a stage. The crowd reactions were deafening, with some fans screaming as if they were watching a romantic drama play out live. Reporters followed them from city to city, publishing stories that blurred the line between fact and fantasy. Gossip magazines claimed Dolly and Kenny were sneaking into each other's hotel rooms after shows, while others hinted at secret meetings that neither star ever confirmed. Kenny admitted years later that their stage chemistry may have been too convincing, saying, "We flirted constantly." And it was true. The playful teasing was never-ending. Dolly would call Kenny her favorite duet partner with a wink, while Kenny joked that he had been trying to make her fall in love with him for decades. No matter how many times they denied it, the speculation never stopped. Dolly insisted in interviews that Kenny was like a brother to her, while Kenny explained that they respected each other too much to cross that line. But fans weren't buying it. The irony was that Dolly and Kenny seemed to enjoy the mystery. They never appeared angry about the rumors, often brushing them off with humor instead. But behind the laughter, some wondered if there was more truth than either of them wanted to admit. For years, Dolly Parton and Kenny Rogers toyed with the public's curiosity, letting fans and tabloids wonder if something more was happening behind the curtain. But privately, the two had an understanding that defined their entire relationship. Both admitted in later interviews that there had been moments of temptation, fleeting sparks when they felt the pull toward something deeper. But they also knew the risk. Dolly often joked that if they had ever acted on their attraction, they probably wouldn't still be friends today. Kenny echoed her words, explaining that the reason their partnership endured for so long was precisely because they never let it turn romantic. Kenny once confessed that the timing was never right. Whenever he and Dolly were at their closest, one or both of them were already in relationships. Dolly was married to Carl Dean, and despite his absence from her public life, she remained loyal to him. Kenny, meanwhile, had a string of marriages that often ended in heartbreak. To pursue something with Dolly would have meant risking not only their friendship, but also their reputations and the careers they had built. Kenny admitted later that he believed they could have been lovers, but he was convinced it would have ruined everything else. By the early 2010s, Dolly Parton and Kenny Rogers had been friends for more than 3 decades. Their most emotional collaboration came in 2013, when they reunited for a duet called You Can't Make Old Friends. Unlike the upbeat love songs and playful banter of their earlier hits, this track carried the weight of time. The lyrics spoke about aging, about cherishing those who had been by your side through every season of life. When they performed it together in the studio, emotions ran high. At one point, Dolly wrapped her arms around Kenny's neck and whispered, "Kenny, I could never sing at your funeral." It was a haunting admission, one that revealed just how deeply she valued him. 4 years later, in 2017, Kenny announced his retirement from touring with a star-studded farewell event called All In for the Gambler. The night was a celebration of his career, but the highlight came when Dolly joined him on stage one last time. Together, they sang Islands in the Stream and You Can't Make Old Friends, their voices blending as effortlessly as they had back in 1983. But this time, the joy was tinged with sadness. The audience could feel it, the recognition that this was the end of an era. When the final notes faded, the two embraced tightly, holding on as if neither wanted to let go. For fans, it was an unforgettable moment. For Dolly, it was the painful realization that the days of standing side by side with Kenny on stage were over. On March 20th, 2020, the news that fans had dreaded for years finally broke. Kenny Rogers had passed away at the age of 81. His death from natural causes came quietly at his home in Sandy Springs, Georgia, surrounded by his family. But the silence that followed was deafening. Within hours, tributes poured in from across the world. Fellow artists, country legends, and pop stars alike honored him as one of the most versatile performers in American music history. Yet no tribute was more anticipated or more heartbreaking than the one from Dolly Parton. That morning, Dolly sat at her piano, recording a video for the millions of fans grieving alongside her. Her eyes glistened with tears as she spoke in a trembling voice. "I loved Kenny with all my heart. My heart is broken." She paused, looking down as if trying to gather herself, before continuing with words that cut through the silence of the moment. "I know we all know Kenny is in a better place, but I'm sure he's talking to God today, if he ain't already." For someone who had always joked her way around questions of romance, the weight of her grief said more than any rumor ever could. Fans weren't just watching a superstar mourn. They were witnessing a woman who had lost one of the most important people in her life. The pain lingered long after that first tribute. Dolly later admitted she never truly prepared herself for the day she'd lose Kenny. She confessed that every time she performed Islands in the Stream, she felt his presence beside her, almost as though his spirit was singing along. Even after Kenny Rogers' passing, the fascination with his relationship with Dolly Parton has never died. In fact, the mystery only grew stronger. For decades, fans watched them laugh, flirt, and share stages as though they were joined at the hip, and though both swore they were only friends, audiences were never convinced. To this day, people debate whether Dolly and Kenny were soulmates who resisted romance or secret lovers who simply refused to admit it. Few duets in music history have left such an imprint on popular culture. Islands in the Stream is still played on the radio, covered by new artists, and sung at karaoke bars across the globe. Their story continues to inspire both nostalgia and speculation. For some, it's proof that true platonic soulmates exist, that two people can share a love so powerful it doesn't need romance to be meaningful. For others, it remains one of country music's greatest unsolved mysteries. But perhaps that's why their partnership remains so captivating. Unlike so many Hollywood relationships that end in bitterness or scandal, Dolly and Kenny's bond stood the test of time, unchanged by fame, gossip, or even death. The story of Dolly Parton and Kenny Rogers will forever stand as one of country music's greatest mysteries. For more than 40 years, they gave the world duets that defined an era, performances filled with laughter, and a friendship that seemed too good to be true. By keeping the truth between themselves, Dolly and Kenny left the rest of us with a story we'll never stop talking about. Was it friendship? Was it love? Or was it something in between that words can't describe? Perhaps the answer lies in the songs they left behind, timeless duets that continue to bring people together decades later. So what do you think? Did Dolly and Kenny make the right choice by keeping things the way they were? Or is there still a hidden chapter we'll never know? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you enjoyed uncovering this story, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and keep watching for more untold stories from the legends of music.